championship tournament for college football is out. It's up. Thank you for rolling with us. Field of 12, George Whitfield, Michael Felder, Christian Hackenberg. Fellas, we just watched like the rest of the world as they laid out the four teams have it going into the dance. Georgia at 1, Michigan 2, TCU at 3, Ohio State coming in at 4, and the games have been broke down. First, let's go into the thoughts of did they get this right? Hack, I'll start with you. What was your overall impression on how the committee went about laying this out?
I think they got it as right as they could. I think from the beginning, I've been a big proponent, as I've said, about the expansion and how hard it is to really cut through to 4 teams when defined lines of what the criteria of a playoff team is. When it's only 4 of them, and especially in this game and all the other variables that are going into today's college football. So for everything that it goes into it and all the other chaos that has happened this weekend, I think they got as close to it as possible. And I'm excited about these matchups. I know I've been big 2 Big Ten teams all year. Happy it ended up working out. I think they're both going to be great representations. Both are going to get healthy. Obviously this Georgia team's been handling their business, and TCU went to war last night. Unfortunately, came up a little bit short, but I think when you're comparing them to other teams, they got a little bit more metal. Other options, I guess, for people trying to pick for the 4, they got a little more metal than other teams. So I'm excited to see what they can do and what type of noise they can make. So I'm excited for these 4 teams. I don't know if they got it right or wrong, but I'm excited for it. So I hope the average fan is.
I think all kind of fans will be for different reasons. Hack, I agree. Felder, what are you most excited about when you see the entirety of the season coming down to these 2 matchups?
I go back to 2007 LSU, 2-loss national champion. What was the drum that they consistently beat? We've never lost it. We're undefeated in regulation. Undefeated in regulation. And I think you look at TCU, guess what they are? Undefeated in regulation. And I think that, no, they didn't win their conference title, but again, undefeated in regulation. And I'm still not sure that Miller didn't get that ball across. So it's one of those things for me. I think this is kind of the perfect matchup. Pre-show, we were talking about it, and I referenced that this is a television show. So I wouldn't have been surprised if it was Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, 4 big names. But what you have right now with TCU, you've got that 2 first to 15 seed, or you got that NCAA first round element of an upset. You got a Cinderella. I've seen folks complain all the time about the big teams just keep getting in. The big teams keep getting in. It's so hard to. I can't root for these big teams. It's the same teams every year. Well, it's not the same team this year. It's not a super huge major program this year. It's a program that is. They don't have nearly the things from stadium size to the money to facility. They don't have nearly the same things as these 3 other teams. So if you're someone that's been complaining about the same teams being in, I need to see you gung-ho fully behind TCU.
100%. That's a great point. That's a great point. That's the banner you need to run and grab right now for yourselves. Let's touch quick on all the teams that just threw up on themselves in this last couple of weeks. Clemson.
Yep.
Beat South Carolina, a 1-loss Clemson that also wins the ACC champ. They're not in. I mean, Ohio State's not in. They're not in. Tennessee, again, beat by South Carolina. And then they had the injury to Hendon Hooker. Beat South Carolina. All the momentum they brought this season. 2 SEC teams join in here. And then Alabama, 5th. They come in, first one out, handle business on the last play of the game in either game. And the Roman army is in. Who should feel the worst? And I guess that's a tough question, but who's kicking themselves probably the hardest, Hack, out of those 5 on down teams?
Well, I'm curious to hear y'all's answer to this too, and I think it's 2-pronged, but just off the top of my head, without putting a ton of thought into it, it's got to be Alabama, and I think it's partially because of how they lost. To your point, George, it's like you're like right there, man. And you could vividly identify 4 or 5 plays where, like, whether you went over them in practice the whole week before that and didn't execute, like there's I think there's more distinguishable scar tissue in a few of those games for them, to see how close they were. And also the expectation there, right? And I think you kind of have both of those elements. I think Alabama's probably kicking themselves the hardest. But I think the other program I mean, obviously Tennessee, with them being 5 and 6, obviously they were the ones that they were thinking about outside of that. I think you can make an argument for SC too. Like they weren't quite there yet. So I think for Alabama, like, they've been there, they've been a staple, they've been a cowbell. The first year you get left out of it, it's got to be like, and how close they were. That's got to be really hard. It's got to be a real hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, listen. You said everything. Like they know where they messed up. They know the 4 or 5 plays where they made critical errors. They know, a busted coverage. They know a wrong gap fit. They understand how it happened to them, and that's got to hurt. I think I do think that USC, though, when you're sitting at 4, and you have everything on your racket, and I know Caleb Williams got dinged up. Utah, I've talked about them all season long. I love this team. To lose the way that they did, I don't know. Does it make you feel better that you got blown out by 23? So you feel like you weren't even that close and you were a year ahead of schedule? That was a rough game to watch in the second half.
That's a unique point. I mean, they got beat twice by this team, right?
Yes.
So it's if I'm sitting there, I'm like, damn, like, we took 2 swings at this dude and he still knocked us out. Like, I can't say shit about that.
You've said it all season long. It's really hard to beat a team twice.
Yeah.
And listen, point proven by K-State and TCU.
And I'd rather see USC get knocked out in their own neighborhood than get on the national stage against this monster,
right,
and get taken apart. Go and get that taken care of. We'll see you next year.
That's a good point.
Nobody wants to see all that. Here's what Vegas says as of last week. Georgia is a 5.5 point favorite over Ohio State, and Michigan is a 5.5 point favorite over TCU at neutral sites. Does that feel about right to you?
What do we have? You said 5, both of them are 5.5?
Georgia and Michigan are 5.5 point favorites in these matchups.
Yeah, they both feel like non-committal lines to me, though.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of saying, like, it could be a close game, but then it couldn't be. Like, that's non-committal on Vegas's part. I'm calling them out.
I think I'm curious to see as we actually get into it, what happens. Right. As you mentioned, non-committal. Like, does this Michigan line grow? Excuse me. And does Ohio State make it tighter? That's the part I'm looking forward to seeing.
Well, and Hack said this before we got on air about, does Ohio State get all of its superheroes? What's Jackson Smith and Jigba's situation?
Right.
Does the fact that they're in the dance now change that?
Correct. He's got 4 weeks to get healthy, to feel good, to get all the treatment done, to talk with advisors, to roll back in here. An Ohio State team with Harrison Jr. on one side and Smith and Jigba on the other, and all these running backs come trotting back out here healthy. Like, does the committee get a little bit of the insight on what's going on in Columbus? That's going to be different because they'll be at their full powers. And then Michigan's backfield gets healthy. TC, like, everybody's going to get a chance to get healthy. This is going to be really exciting. Fellas, let's go into the matchups themselves. And in Atlanta, Georgia effectively being one will get the home game.
Yeah.
They will host this Buckeye team that does travel. They have taken on heavyweights over their history, recent and otherwise. I like the juxtaposition of style, right? Style makes fights. But the last team, and really the only team that Ohio State played with this type of style, is Michigan. Blunt force. We're going to win the line of scrimmage. We're downhill run game, and a defense that plays east, west, and all over everywhere. What does the style of this game say to the Buckeyes, Hack?
So here's the thing, and I talked about this with Josh Perry. I think I might have mentioned this with you guys as well. And we talked about it on the text chain yesterday. and this is not me like attacking Michigan for anybody who's listening, but that Michigan-Ohio State game from a physicality standpoint was not like last year's game. Like Ohio State matched, and if not, was on the winning side of it for the vast majority of the 4 quarters. They have to put a full one together. You can't give up 350 plus yards in 5 plays in a football game. You cannot do that
Bingo.
and beat the best teams, right?
Right.
That was the first time it happened to him this year. New defensive philosophy, not making excuses, just an element that you have to take into effect.
Sure.
Experienced it. A month to prepare with that coaching staff. To me, this is going to be a dogfight. Yeah. And I think the styles are going to clash very well because I think Ohio State has improved significantly defensively. Mm-hmm. I know Georgia's going to come in and have wrinkles, and they are going to be who they are. They've been that all year. They're going to be very tough. They have some explosion. They have some mismatch issues offensively that they present for defenses and some explosive capability. And then defensively, they're going to come out and probably try to confuse CJ Stroud because that's how you got to attack him. You got to get Ohio State away from the run game. That's exactly what happened in the Michigan game. Ohio State was running the football at like a little over 4 yards a clip, which is awesome, very efficient. They abandoned the run game, which is something Ryan Day hasn't done all year. What he did very regularly last year, and just started chucking the ball around the field, abandon it. So if I'm Georgia, I got to start thinking about how I'm going to create the game and try to take those tendencies and turn them and spin them into my favor. But I think that matchup's phenomenal, and I'm really excited to watch this one. Of course, I've been an Ohio State homer. I'll admit it here to everybody. I've been very excited about this team all year. I think that they're really close, and I've said it. I think this year, if they're going to win it, this is Ryan Day's year, especially if he can get Jackson Smith and Jigba back on that field and get those guys healthy, which they will. Mayan Williams will be healthy, and Travion Henderson will be healthy. Like, I think this is Day's year to win it. And honestly, CJ should be pissed off because everyone's talking about CJ's never beat Michigan, never won a Big Ten championship. You got all the record books rewritten, my guy. But all these other dudes got all this medal. They got all those war medals on their jackets that you don't have.
Right.
You got all the stuff that really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So to me, this needs to mean a lot for CJ Stroud and his legacy at Ohio State. Because he wins a national championship, that fixes all of it.
100%. Felder, Hack's biggest point that he made there, Georgia getting off the bus and Ohio State getting off the bus, Ohio State's not giving anything away matchup-wise, man for man. The units might be more experienced, and they have that championship medal there in Athens. But we did talk about it. Georgia swapped out 1/3 of its team last year, either to the draft or to the portal, guys contributing, but saying, hell, I can go start someplace else. Ohio State's got Gazelles. Ohio State's got Silverbacks. They got a frontline, big-time head coach leading them, and they've been battle-tested as well. They should feel just as much on equal footing as anybody else going up against this Georgia team, yes?
Yeah, I mean, they're the first tape they're going to watch is Georgia and LSU. That's going to be the first one that they watched. And they're going to watch Jane Daniels finding holes. They're going to watch Nussmeier coming in and popping off on them.
Yep.
Outside of 5, who do you trust in that secondary for Georgia? Outside of 5, who do you trust in that secondary?
5 is not the freshman, right?
No, 5 is Keely Ringo.
Ringo, yep.
Yeah, because there were times where I didn't do the work to put the names in, but I got the numbers all written down in the notes. 24, 29, 22, all of them made critical errors. Missed tackles, bad angles, coverage busts, like all those things happen. So outside of 5, and look, we saw Nussmeier make a perfect throw over Ringo for a touchdown. So if I'm CJ Stroud and that's the first thing I pop in, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then they're going to go through and they're going to watch. I'm sure they're going to watch and they're going to rewatch every game. But the ones that I think they're going to focus on are probably going to be that Georgia LSU game. You've got to dial into that Tennessee game, which was super critical in an offense that is not the same offense as yours, but plays that explosive style. Yes. So I think you've got to dial into those things, and then you've got to figure out what they're going to do defensively to you. When are they going to bring pressure? And I'll say this, I've said this for most of the season, CJ Stroud has to take somebody out of this defense. I know he doesn't like to run, but he has to make someone, whether it's play a spy or put somebody up top so that creates space in the run game. You've got to make them do one or the other. You have to make them do one or the other, because otherwise, and we saw that with Jaden Daniels, him manipulating the spy to hit those little spacing routes while the spy is worried about him, and then he has a guy just hugged up to the sticks. Boom, that's an easy throw. And if you can make
good
that
coaching.
happen,
that's a good coaching note as well.
Yeah, Brian Kelly is a good coach. Brian Kelly is a good coach. And
well, let's go into it. Felder, let me ask you. Georgia's offense, Georgia's defense, Ohio State's offense, Ohio State's defense. Which of these units is under the most pressure?
Ohio State's defense.
What's trying to withstand this downhill onslaught and these tight ends?
It's the downhill, but it's the tight ends. They also have their wide receivers are starting to bubble to the top. Like they got some good, they got some talent outside too. Yeah, like this team, and I don't know if we're going to see a healthy Ladd McConkey. I noticed he sat out the second half, but he's part of that heart and soul of that team. Who's covering Brock Bowers for Ohio State? Yeah, better find out now. And I tell you what, you're not going to get a simulation. Let's go back to, you mentioned the downhill. You're not going to get a good simulation in your 9-on-7 against Scout of Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington standing next to Broderick Jones on one side of the offensive line.
You know, here's an interesting point to that. I think I agree with you. I think the defense is under some pressure, but I feel like Jim Knowles is he's going to live and die by the 3 ball. He's already shown that. Yes. So I think that they're going to create some opportunities and some chances where they're going to back Georgia into holes and possibly confuse them and take advantage of it.
Yep. If
that so happens a couple of times, great. I think that it's the offense, and particularly the offense's execution once they get on their side of the field. Yes. You got to stop kicking field goals, because that's something that's kicked them in the ass. And I know, again, I've brought this up, but everyone talks about it. Oh, yeah, they have one of the best red zone offenses in the country statistically. Great. I'm sure they
do. When it mattered.
But
when it mattered, about the Buckeyes, yes.
Ohio State. But when it mattered, they kicked field goals when they needed 6 more times than not. So to me, that's where I'm looking for them to spend a tremendous amount of time. And again, there's some health factors here, and arguably one of the best receivers in college football that we've been talking about, who we've seen catch, I think, like 3 footballs against Notre Dame week 1. Yeah. So
played in 5 games.
Yeah, just not like, and it was a shell of himself. So if he gets healthy, gets back out there, you got him, and then his backup's backup, who ended up emerging as probably the best receiver in the country, in Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's something that is impactful enough to be a game changer, specifically in that area of the field.
Yeah, I think that's going to be tremendous. I also look at which of these 2 coaches would be more prone to take a shot or a chance, throw dice. I mean, now you're in now, so it's almost like you don't save anything per se. But in terms of big game coaching, Ryan Day has shown his chops to stand up alongside the rest of these guys. He just hasn't ever been in the dance. That might be kind of like going against the point, but he has been a great coach up against other great coaches. The other battle that's going to show out is the quarterback matchup. And if Ohio State's defense is the worst or under the most pressure, is it fair to say Georgia's defense, are they the best unit in this game? Or is it strength? I mean, yes, it's strength on strength, but are they equal strengths? Or is Georgia's defense a better unit than Ohio State's offense, how we see it, which tilts that quarterback battle?
I think Georgia's defense is better
unit than Ohio State's.
Yeah, I think we're ranking the 4 units. I think I would go Georgia's defense 1, Ohio State's offense 2, and probably Georgia's offense 3, and then Ohio State's offense 4. I think this is, but I know we got to do picks at the end, but I mean, when you lay it out like that, it's pretty clear the way that I'm leaning.
Yeah. Hack, you agree with that breakdown though? Yeah. Ohio State's in this game, Ohio State's offense is 2.
Yeah. I mean,
2 or 1B.
Yeah, you said in terms of best units, right?
In this matchup.
Yeah. I mean, I'd throw it at 2. Just keep it clean. Like, I don't want to. I just think it's like, I literally think this game could be a pick 'em.
Yes.
I know it's probably not what people want to hear, but I Ohio State, and to your point, George, like Day is a guy who hasn't sat at the table, but has been at other big tables that weren't this table, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like
100%.
he's got a lot of experience in the league. He's been around a lot of really successful guys. And I just don't think he's afraid of anybody. I think he'll put his nuts on the table with anybody. He's not afraid to do that. So that's a big element of it to me. And I really think that this game's going to be a everything we expected and then some.
Last postseason, we had a chance to watch CJ Stroud go to the Rose Bowl without his two big receivers who went forward with the draft. And he threw for what? Almost 500 yards against the sturdy Utah team. I mean, he got loose. CJ Stroud, in my eyes, would be the X factor in this game. And it's hard to say, like a kid who's been sitting there in the Heisman discussion really for the last 18 months would be an X factor. But Ohio State has to run enough not to get put in these obvious passing situations. So they have to run enough. But him throwing strikes and throwing these timely balls on third down, staying in front of the chains, mitigating damage. And again, I don't know if it was Felder or Hack. You're right. He has to take some chances running the ball. You got to go steal 10 yards on a 3rd and 7 on your own.
On a side note with that, George, like how important do you think these two games are for CJ Stroud and his draft stock? Like how important do you think, like how much do you think he can change if he comes out here and beats Georgia and then wins a national championship? Let's just say for the sake of drama, goes back and avenges a game 2 in the national championship against Michigan and wins them both convincingly. Is he the no doubt, no brain number 1 guy?
No doubt, no brain.
$30 million, like doesn't even have to show up to the combine.
Because this is where you show that mettle. Remember, you were just talking about the jacket with the other fellas. Nobody questions his passing ability, Felder. Nobody questions his ability to process, Felder. Nobody really questions him being in there at such a young age. Like he only has 2 losses in his career, and they're both Michigan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Now it's about the medal. Who else got Ohio
Oregon
State?
got him.
Oregon.
Yeah. 3.
So he's got 3 losses. But to go down to Atlanta and bring an Ohio State team that, they're not really being celebrated right now, making it into this thing, like you don't give a shit. So in we are. Here we come. And Georgia's, they may not be the White Walkers, but I mean, they're walking enough. This is still the most vicious unit in the dance. Go in there and make some plays against this team. Turn around and find out whoever comes from Arizona, make plays against them. Hack, to me, on medal alone, he goes to 1.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, to me, like you were saying, like you said, but you were trying to defend, like saying he's the X factor to me is not crazy because he has personal reasons why it should be an X factor in terms of financial gain for what's going to happen in April to him. And then he also has legacy. There's a legacy element of that for him at this school that he's done so much for too. That's been challenged. Like to me, if I was CJ, like that would be all I needed to come out here and just put together my 2 best performances in college football and say, thank you guys so much. I'm out and just ride off in the sunset. Like it would be fantastic for the kid, for a kid who's had so much expectation. Like if he can compartmentalize it like that and come out and play well, would be phenomenal.
Yeah. Felder? No, I agree. I don't think it's wrong to say he's the X factor. I think he's got a lot on his shoulders, both, as you mentioned, for Ohio State and for himself. And the goal's to win. The goal's always to win. And so he's going to have to push him. He's going to have to push himself to do more to make sure that they win. And that's going to be the part. That's why I mentioned the legs. That's why I mentioned being able to move some guys around with those legs. Georgia has to respect the fact that he might pull that when they run that zone. He might pull it and take off. You have to make them respect that, because what they've seen on film so far, they don't need to really respect it. I mean, this is a guy that's ran for 74 yards, and I know that includes sacks, but that's not scary right now.
No, it's not scary, but what is scary, he looks at more killers skill-wise in his huddle than maybe any of the other 4 teams do theirs, to the exception of Georgia with those tight ends. But like he's got guys in his huddle who can win the game on their own if left alone. Ohio State, Georgia, Atlanta. That'll be one semifinal. The other one, fellas, going out west, Michigan Wolverines and TCU. Both these teams have had all kinds of momentum. Watching them, Michigan, it's like watching their season the whole way. You're like, okay, good. That's another good win. Well, that's another good win. That's another good performance. But in everybody's mind, but Columbus, they go through, blow the doors off of Ohio State, so they get through that echelon. And now we watch them up against TCU. Some have called it a team of destiny. 4 or 5 one-score games and a field goal to win an expiration, tough battle in their conference championship. How would you rank these 4 units in this game? Felder, I'll go with you first.
I just want to say one thing. You want to talk about having killers in your huddle? TCU.
Yeah.
Johnston, Barber, Williams, Wiley came on strong in that game.
Yeah.
These guys, they got dudes there. They got real, those aren't like good for TCU dudes. Those are dudes that are going to play on Sunday.
Yeah.
So if I had to rank these units, I think probably Michigan defense 1. I'm not in love with Michigan's offense. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, even watching them yesterday. Ooh.
Yeah, 4. I agree with Hack. 4.
Yeah. Okay. Then
Blake Corum ain't coming back.
Right. Exactly.
They got some dudes, but they do stay within their budget. They know they have the smallest budget. They shop within their budget. They stay, complement the defense. I'm not opposed to saying Michigan's offense in this game is for really of any of the games, maybe out of the whole lineup, if we're going to be all the way on it. No, they're not. Michigan's offense is not. I wouldn't put them below Ohio State's defense.
But what was JJ last night? He was 11 for 17.
Real economical.
Incredibly. And I am truly
fiscally conservative.
I think you can win the Big Ten that way. I don't know if you can win the playoff that way. You might be able to beat TCU because they are a smaller football team than you. And you can lean on them. I mean, I was watching the game last night, and the biggest thing for me was I going in, I said, you know what? If Purdue's within 8 at halftime, they've got an opportunity. Now we see 2 awful interceptions.
Yeah.
And that opened up the game because it gave Michigan extra possessions. But coming out of that football game, I was like, Donovan, they've got Donovan Edwards and
a bunch of dudes just trying to come downhill. They don't really have it's the ultimate look of a committee. Hack, I go with Felder. Michigan's defense is easily, I don't know if it's easily won, but it's won, in my opinion, in this game. How would you drop another 2, 3, 4 units?
Like I said, I mean, to me, it would probably be TCU's offense as like a 1B for the reason that Felder brought up. 2.
And by the way, Kendre Miller. Don't forget Kendre Miller too.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot of guys that they could get the football to and who could win. And then, I mean, I think like it's a tussle between TCU's defense and Michigan's offense, just because, again, I think it's more of one of those things that you say, George, where it's a matter of styles, right? Like I think Michigan's offensive style doesn't really bode well for TCU's style defensively. But if they can get Michigan behind the sticks a couple times and force them to start throwing the football, then it bounces out, right? So what do you have to do in order to do that? What type of risks do you have to take on 1st and 2nd down? Right. And how much film study and how much game planning and tendency study do you need to do in order to be able to, like, okay, I know I can take this risk right now and be 100% confident in it without getting bit in the ass because Michigan's shown the ability to do that. Right. We saw it yesterday with Deuce Vaughn multiple times. Correct. And we saw it in coverage.
with Vaughn in coverage. Those linebackers didn't know what to do with them, and then we saw it in the run game. One of the long runs that Vaughn had, and you know it's ugly when it looks like this. We got a hole right here. We got a Kansas State player right here. We got 2 TCU players right here, and then another K-State guy. That you can't play football like that.
No. Which of these units is under the most pressure? And this doesn't, to me, go necessarily to the 4th ranked one. TCU style of play is a slow roller. Like, I don't know how many games they've trailed at halftime, but their first half plus minus is minus. And then they have to kind of they get loose and a lot of jabs.
They just
then
sit
they
there
get
and throw
loose.
a lot of jabs.
Look, Michigan's had some of those same issues.
Michigan has too, 100%, but it's
right.
different. I feel like TCU's jabs have like a little. They got like a little tank of nitrous down here, and they could just like at any point in time, one of those jabs could pop.
Right.
I don't quite feel like that. Not saying like Donovan Edwards can't rip off like he can.
Sure,
they have explosive guys, but the style and how they do it, it just doesn't feel that way when you're watching it, right? It's just two different offenses that it just doesn't feel like that when you're sitting there going like, oh yeah, they could pop one off. Like you're probably going to sit there and go, oh yeah, TCU is definitely going to rip one off before Michigan does. If I had to pick, stalemate. You know what I mean?
Listen,
probably not true, but you know,
dude, when you chuck that up listen, if you got Max Duggan back there, by the way, shout out to him for that performance. Amazing.
Baller,
remarkable.
Man.
Remarkable.
Baller.
At any play, he can rise and fire to Quentin Johnston, a 6'5" guy. He looks right a little bit. Your safety trails off, and all of a sudden he's coming back to the left, just putting it up there. Worst case scenario, what? 15-yard penalty. Best case scenario for them, he catches it, shakes off a tackle, and he's scoring a touchdown. And they can do that on any given play.
Yep.
But to me, TCU's got to get. They got 4 weeks to get going. They either have to change their tempo, toy with tempo a little bit in that first half. They're going to have to do something.
They got to protect Duggan too.
And they got to protect Duggan because the Wolverines do get pressure, and we've seen that. We watched that against Stroud and O'Connell last night. Michigan is more of a freight train, and they just kind of get you done, like get the job done overall in process. TCU to me is the sports car that stalls, then they get going and they take off. You fall behind this Michigan team, and they're already a possession-eating offense. I mean, that's going to be a tough.
But they haven't. But honestly, though, they didn't show the propensity. They had two sustained drives against Ohio State the whole game. The one was
the Wolverines.
Right. And I think they both ended up in field goals.
And they start popping off those home runs on the ground.
Well, they popped off 5 home runs at the end. That's again at the end. What I'm saying is when they needed to possess the football, they did it twice, and they did it at a really key time. That end of the third, into the fourth quarter, where they had that long 7-minute drive that just ate Ohio State's chances up. But they, against I think equal opponents, they really haven't shown this like propensity to just dominate and have 6, 7, 8-minute drives like over and over and over again. It's been a little more spread out than you think.
Yep.
Not saying that they can't, but what I'm saying is that as much of they've done it timeliness, but to your point, George, I think what you were trying to say is they need to be able to do this for 4 quarters against this team, limit their chances, and don't even let them figure out the stall. Like Tranny drops out that thing real quick and it's done.
Bingo.
You know what I mean?
Felder,
you got
question for you.
Go ahead.
The X factor for Michigan. This man must have his best game in order for the Wolverines to see themselves on into the national championship. Who is the X factor for the Wolverines in your opinion?
I'm going to say, well, I know everyone's going to say JJ McCarthy. I'm going to say Mike Sanderson. Nickel guy, can play some safety. He converted from wide receiver a season ago. He's, to me, has been one of their best players on defense.
Yep.
He's all over. Last night, I don't think he had his best game. And Purdue, outside to get back inside. And I think that gave him and the rest of that secondary some trouble. And we saw that. Purdue had a 7-minute drive of them just going boom, boom. Oh, you want to overexpand? Boom. Let's hit you right here. You want that? Let's hit the cross. Boom. So I just think that Mike Sanders still is going to have to play. He's going to because at some point he's going to have to cover Tay Barber.
And that's great prep for the Wolverines seeing Purdue like that.
Yes.
And that's the last experience you have before you go see this wide open TCU attack like that. So Felder's got the Michigan nickel.
Yeah.
Yep.
As the X factor or the man who must come forward. Who is it for you?
So I do agree with him. I think everyone's going to pick JJ, and I think he's obviously going to have a coming out party here at some point in time. To me, it's the Michigan coordinators on both sides of the football. Yeah. I think this team has shown flashes and glimpses of just a really dominant, ball possessing, stifling defense. Like just a complete football team. They've shown so many flashes on both sides of the football. And I think a month's worth of prep, another Big Ten championship under your belt. You really need to come into this college football playoff putting your best foot forward. And right now, as a coaching staff, I'm taking it personal to make sure that these kids are as prepared as possible to put the best product on the field. And for this team to play at its capabilities. Because if the team plays at its capabilities, it's a bitch. It's going to be a tough matchup for anybody. I think really Georgia's the best matchup. If Michigan plays at the best of their abilities consistently, Georgia's the only team that I think can play that style for 4 quarters.
Exactly.
That rugged, but also that execution, that level of execution. Felder, to Hag's point, the 2 best performances by Michigan were against its 2 best opponents. They took Penn State apart and they blew up Ohio State. But yes, the effort in the helmet and shoulder pads was phenomenal. But the game plans these guys saved or manipulated, the halftime adjustments that they had in the second half with Ohio State, I felt like some of that stuff, they just came into the game knowing we're not even opening that box until we get to the second half. That they're going to need that against TCU because you're right. The from a tactical standpoint, and this is why Harbaugh went and got I forget the young coordinator's name. It brought the young defensive coordinator in from the Ravens, from his brother. They traded coaches. Schematically, find out other ways to pressure that won't make you vulnerable. And who can we go up and run against? And so Penn State, like a power finesse team, Ohio State, a power finesse team, TCU, a power finesse team. Now they got 4 weeks. Your X factor on the other side for TCU would be who, Felder?
It's Kendre Miller, right? It's that offensive line. They've got to be able to. So I'll go offensive line because if they are not strong enough, and this is
agreed.
I'll go all the way back to week 1 with Utah and Florida. Utah was they were too small. They were too small against Florida to control the line of scrimmage. And I want to see what TCU looks like. They play a lot of 3-man fronts. Or excuse me, I want to see what sorry, I got ahead of myself. I want to see what TCU's offensive line looks like against that. We know Michigan's defensive line is hulky. We know they're huge. We know they can hold the edge. We know they can get push from the interior. We know all those things. Can TCU generate space up front so that Kendre Miller can run? To me, that's the X factor, that TCU offensive line. And by the way, please help Max Duggan. Yeah. Please don't let them hit him.
Yeah.
Yep. Honestly, all kinds of ways to run the ball. Do they get in like draw screen type situations? All this east-west behind the line.
Swing stuff.
Swings and bubbles. But you're right. This is the wrong opponent where a yard's needed or a half a yard's needed. Hack.
We saw that. We saw that last night. We saw that yesterday.
You're out here fumbling around, and you need answers for your 2-yard situation, your yard situation.
Bingo.
Michigan is the wrong team to be around here fumbling around with Hack. Do you agree with Michael about the ability of those 5 up front and that coordinator find ways to run this ball?
I was going to expand on that. I was going to say anybody involved with keeping Max Duggan upright. That's Lincoln's little brother. Is Garrett? Am I right?
Yes.
Garrett Riley. Mm-hmm. That's Garrett Riley. That's Sonny Dykes may have to get his hand in there. Like anybody involved with keeping Max Duggan upright and not banged up and looking like he just, survived trench warfare in World War I after a football game.
Yeah.
Is going to be very, very important to me. And the unique part about that is I think Max Duggan's ability to run the football, propensity to run the football, get him a little more involved. I think that's going to it's going to create some lanes. It's going to create some mismatches for them, or not mismatches, but numbers and leverage and angles for them offensively to where they don't necessarily have to out physical Michigan. They just have to get them on, get on them for a second, hold their spot, get to the second level, and just give a crease, right? And then everything else, the window dressing and everything else plays a big factor in that. So for me, their ability to do that, but also protect Max Duggan because he's the X factor. Max Duggan's not playing, man. I don't think this TCU team's got a chance.
No, and Felder, go off of that, Felder.
Here's the thing. We talked about it with CJ Stroud, right?
Yeah.
Max will do it. He will do it. And you have to worry about him with that hanger. You have to worry about him pulling it and keeping it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a way to help open up the run game. That's a way to help open up so that your offensive line, they're not going to be physically bigger, stronger than Michigan. But if you get that guy to take a step, you get that linebacker, we talk about doubling up in a gap, you get that linebacker to take a step over, now we got a Miller, a run for him. He can hit a crease.
A lot of that two-way go, you're right.
Yeah.
Duggan had the last drive in regulation, he ran himself for 90+ yards on the drive.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious to see in the modern era, how many quarterbacks have done that on one drive? How many quarterbacks? So called
maybe runs, Braxton Miller. Like maybe Braxton Miller. Like that's
one of the last superheroes in college football. But the means and methods in which you get first downs could come all kinds of ways. Sometimes just, running 4 verts, but swinging, running your check on a swing.
Yep.
And seeing what the lanes look like. So either we can catch something on the way out, or you could take it because we're opening this thing up. Having that built for him is going to be like that's going to add some stress and pressure on Michigan. Where do you see that game going in your heart of hearts? TCU, Michigan. Felder, I'll start with you.
I think Michigan's I think it's gonna be a very close game. I think that TCU is gonna do something that they've done all year, which is push the ball down the field. I don't care how good you are as a corner. I don't care how good you are as a safety. You can get your ass ate up. Everyone can get it. There's footage of.
That's been the biggest question mark with Michigan's team too, is their defensive backfield. I don't think they answered any of that against Ohio State either. So just throwing that out there to help your point.
Yeah. So I think that TCU's going to hit. They're going to land some of those, as you mentioned, those infused jabs that can hurt you a little bit. And then Michigan's going to slow build. Michigan is, what are they, number 4 in the country in time of possession? It's not a stat that I'm in love with personally, because it means that you're not explosive. And this is a game of explosion.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think they start to lean on them, and you're going to get tired. And that's just what it is. You're going to get tired. And I think that's how they win. It's not the same. It's not, ultimately, I think Michigan's going to lean on them. I think that's the difference in this football game. But I think TCU is going to put up quite the effort.
Hack?
So I think going back to the beginning of this conversation, full circle, testament to who the committee put in. I think these 4 teams are the best 4 teams that, from a matchup standpoint, so give us everything we want. And the way they distributed it, perfect.
Yep.
Unique styles, like you say, George. I agree with Felder. I think Michigan should win this ball game and should lean on them at some point in time. The only thing I will say is if TCU can put it together and throw like 3 of those infused jabs early and get ahead of Michigan before they get go. If they make Michigan play from behind, if you flip it and say, I'm not going to sit here and tussle with you at the line at the starting line here. I'm just going to fucking run. And I'm going to be the rabbit. You got to come catch me.
Yeah.
If they can do that, and that's what I would be preaching if I was TCU. I'm going to be like, we win the toss, we're taking the football. We're going, we're scoring on our first drive. Like, that's my thought process. And if they could do that, I don't think Michigan's tooled to come and play catch up.
I don't think they are either. And they have surprised this year. Felder, that's what I was going to say, just where Hack was going. Michigan does not show track rundown type of ability. They are
they're the
hop
field
on you,
aspect
stay on you, choke you out.
Shot put and discus.
So if TCU could get up first quarter, haymaker, they got, like you guys have both said, they got these small forwards out here with cleats on. Throw some rebounds up to these guys. Let's let them go. Let's go press the issue. You want to have 2-3 scores in the first quarter.
Yes.
And then roll this game back over to McCarthy and the co-coordinators to find out, okay, now how do we chunk the ball fast? How do we catch up to this thing fast? Then you put some pressure on them.
That's what we saw. That's what we saw last night. Is you have to make Michigan play your style of football.
Right.
And Purdue did an exceptional job of that last night in the first half.
They just ain't got the dogs to finish it.
No. Exactly. But they did an exceptional job of making Michigan be out of sorts. They were not comfortable in that football game early, and then they went back to the thing. They said, "Hey man, we can't toy with these guys. We got to just run, and then we'll keep running, and we're going to run." It's one of those. I don't know. It's just one of those games where you're going to have to. You got to do it. They have to control this football game start to finish. And if TCU can throw a wrench in there, it's going to be a really fun and interesting game.
Right. So real quick, thoughts on Bama? Obviously, like, valiant season, but we agree committee had this right, correct? They had their opportunities to handle their business. Picks for Georgia, Ohio State. Hack, I'll go with you. Give me a score.
Damn. It's hard because these are like my two prize jewels from the past 2 years. Like, I've been going with them. I don't know what I think the score is going to be, like one of those like 28-31, 30, like neither team's gonna get over 40 points, but it's going to be in that 28 to like 40 point range, somewhere in there, maybe 42, but somewhere in there for both these teams. I think they're going to figure out how to take shots. I think the Georgia defense is a little more vulnerable vertically than they were last year. And Ohio State will figure out ways to get that done. But I mean, I can't call it, man. I think it's I literally think it's a straight up pick 'em. Selfishly, Big Ten guy, I want to see Ohio State get it done, see if we can get a game match. But then again, I just, it's going to be hard for me to bet against Georgia. So it's non-committal for me. I'm like Vegas right now. I'm non-committal.
No, Vegas committed. Vegas said Georgia by 5.
5. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't
know, man. I'll go Ohio State. Fuck it. I'm going Ohio State. Ohio State wins the game.
Okay, there. Felder. Yeah. Ohio State, Georgia. I'm
going Georgia, and I think Georgia, we're looking at 45-35, 45-38.
I'm going to go. Go ahead. 45-38.
We saw last night that Georgia is on a mission. They went out there last night and they didn't toy around with LSU. They get that first early score, and then Georgia was like, okay, we got to change some things. And obviously Nussmeier came in, had a little bit of success, but you see how Kirby kept all his guys in the game?
Yeah, all the way through.
He was like,
a message was sent. And I think that message is going to continue to be sent on New Year's Eve. I am going to roll with Georgia, but I think it goes into overtime. Ooh. I think you're talking 37-34. To me, the X factor is a guy we haven't really talked about. We don't even know if he's playing. We don't even know what his situation is. Jackson Smith and Jigba hops on the field, the scales immediately go equal. Minus him, and it's not like Ohio State's like one man short. They got plenty of dudes out there to rock and roll with, but it's the threat. It's the anytime home run presence. It's balance in the field. you can't tilt or help one way or the other, and they could do so many more things. So I'm gonna go with the Bulldogs on that. Michigan TCU hack score.
I got this one. Probably not as I don't think it creeps in the 40s. I think it's like 20,
Right.
24, 32, something crazy like that. 31, 28, something like that. I think it's going to be another close game. I think Vegas does have it. I think it'll be within 5 points, but I do think Michigan ultimately outlasts them.
Yeah, I'm going to go 31-27.
Yeah.
Michigan. I think that TCU is going to get 2 or 3. They're not going to score on all those big plays, but I think they're probably going to have 5 explosive plays. They're probably going to score on 2, maybe 3 of those, and then they're going to get stopped probably inside or just outside of the red zone and have to kick a couple field goals. I think that's going to be the difference in the game.
I got Michigan more of a blowout, 42-24, because I think they'll have to find ways of scoring off of turnovers. TCU, because of the style, because of what they'll have to do, they can get to Max Duggan. A lot of pressure is going to be on him. Sack fumbles, interceptions, just creating mayhem. The Wolverines seemed, to me, have shown a propensity to get that type of deal done. So that means, Hack, you have Ohio State and Michigan in a rematch.
I got the game 2.0, baby.
First
time
Georgia.
ever.
Felder and I have Georgia and Michigan in the
Another
championship.
rematch.
Another rematch. Hack, we'll go with your rematch first. Ohio State, Michigan, national championship. You have it going where?
Like I said, man, I think this is Ryan Day's year. Hard to beat a team twice in the same year.
Hey-o!
I think if Ohio State gets it going, dog, I got the Buckeyes coming out of nowhere. Coming out of nowhere. From ashes to the Phoenix again. I ain't gonna get to that point because obviously they got to get there. We'll see what happens. I got to see what they roll out in the field in this semifinal game.
I'm
gonna nerd out over it. But no, so like I said, I ain't even going with the score. I'm just gonna say Ohio State's gonna win. If it is a rematch, Ohio State's gonna win this one.
I picked Ohio State to win it all this year. I've picked it multiple times. I've been watching so much Georgia. I'm in love with them. I think Georgia. Let me ask you guys this before I say anything. Georgia versus Michigan. How many points do you think Georgia wants to score
against Michigan?
Even last night. I think they are a revamped team where they are constantly hunting for anywhere from 40 to 50 points.
Yeah, they can score as much as they want.
And how many points do you think Michigan wants to score? Like on any given Saturday?
One more than the opponent.
Yeah, whatever it takes. They're just
whatever it takes.
Yeah,
I think that's the difference. I think we see a game that looks kind of like last year.
Last year's.
And I mean, that's no disrespect to anybody involved, but I think that an even better Stetson Bennett, an even better, in terms of not just use of Darnell Washington, which I appreciate. Thank you.
Let's talk about Stetson though, right quick.
Yeah.
If this man wins 2 national championships at Georgia,
oh man,
you're not going to be able to tell this guy shit.
Anything.
He's going to own the state of Georgia.
Absolutely.
You're not going to tell him anything.
No.
Anyway, I got to throw that out there. That would be incredible.
Yeah, it would be incredible.
He's going to hit the streets in a way. Just
imagine that.
Yeah, it's going to be unbelievable.
Milkman,
and I think
he's about to be all the mans.
Listen, I think Georgia wins. I think Georgia wins by, call it 17.
I would like to amend my previous statements here on Field of 12. I would like to amend it. I was caught there. I said Georgia would beat Ohio State in overtime by a field goal, which tells you where I'm at. Every so often, the giant gets slayed, and the invincible looks real vincible. I don't even know if vincible is a word. It looks real mortal. I do think Ohio State has enough to rally. I'm going with the Buckeyes in that front game. I do think it's going to be a rematch. I do think it's going to be the college football's version of a Super Bowl.
I convinced George.
Yeah, I do go there. I'm taking that from an overtime kind of a tug of war deal. Buckeyes have enough, and they'll be sobered up, and they'll be they'll have 5 weeks now to
I'll tell-
prep for this, get healthy
And I'll
for
say
this.
this right now too. If they cut my damn Achilles on me right here with this one, because I've been riding with them through the ups and downs this year. If they cut my damn Achilles with them, I'm done. I'm going right back to my roots, and I'm cool with my 3rd place in the Big Ten East. Here we go, Nittany Lions. I'll see you guys in the Rose Bowl. That's what I'm gonna be rallying with, and not talking shit about Ohio State again. But just had to go on record saying that.
Well, I'm going on record as saying I agree with you, Hack. Ohio State, Michigan in the national championship game. You brought them in there. This is the last team anybody wants to see. Buckeyes are sober, edgy. Now they're all fired up. Can they now go get Michigan? I still think Michigan wins the national championship. They've been running, they've been rocking and rolling. Michigan by a touchdown in the national championship. That is it for us. Keep rolling with us all month long. We're going to have special guests, more analysis. We'll be still breaking down this college football playoffs that we've all been waiting for. We're finally here. On behalf of Michael Felder, Christian Hackenberg, Dagan Hughes, and Trevor Valise, I'm George Whitfield Jr. Thanks for rolling with us. We'll see you next week. We're out.